Hey, what's up, guys? Hey, here with Rick Odette, the head baseball coach at St. Leo University in Wesley Chapel, Florida, which is, what'd you say, Rick? It's about 35 miles north of Tampa.
About 35 miles. Yep.
Okay, so had the luxury of working with Rick at St. Joseph's College. I guess, hell, it's probably been 4 or 5 years ago now. So um, if you would start us off, man, just kind of give us a brief overview of your playing career and your coaching career.
Yeah, definitely. I was from Tinley Park, Illinois, which is a south suburb. As I said earlier, Ryan Wietze, he knows the map of the south side and every other Walgreens there is on the corner, so he got them all figured out. But with Park, Illinois, went to Tinley Park High School, played for a great coach named Ron Anderson, somebody I respected immensely, and and really worked for everybody truly. And then I was completely undersized as 5'11", 145-pound left-handed pitcher. So the doors were not banging down for me to come to people's school. So I was fortunate to get a scholarship for $1,000 at St. Joseph's College, just because I had a couple people that thought my arm worked okay, and then possibly project down the road. And fortunately, there's a guy named Rich Hands and Joe Fletcher and our head coach Mike Moises were at St. Joe and gave me an opportunity. So my first year, I came in, I was 5'11", 145, like I said, and about 78 miles an hour. And then after a year, I got fortunate. I'd love to say it was because of all the hard work, but I grew 3 inches and gained 40-plus pounds. And so all of a sudden it was, things were a little bit better. I played on 3 really good teams while I was at St. Joe. My sophomore year, we took second in the country and we were like 52-12 and had a really good group. A lot of guys that had an opportunity to keep playing, and a lot of guys who are still to this day some of my best friends. So I was there after my junior year to be drafted with the Red Sox, played for a couple seasons with them, ended up getting injured, and then trying to figure out what I'm doing next. And fortunately, a guy named Bill Mossos, who's our athletic director and become a good friend of mine, gave me an opportunity as I got offered as a 23-year-old to come back and take over the St. Joe program. So my first year, I was 24-year-old guy that thought he knew everything, and shortly realized I didn't know anything. So I was there and had a great run there with the guys we had and the coaches. Obviously, Ryan, you being one, I'm gonna make you uncomfortable, but I was fortunate to have a lot of really good assistants, and I think Ryan is one of the top in that group for sure. Just for it's obviously his loyalty, and I'm sure his honesty and bluntness, which him and I appreciate gratefully, from that end of it. So we got along great. And then in 2017, Ryan, you were gone at that time for two seasons, I think it was.
Yeah.
And then we were told that the institution financially couldn't stabilize. So they had to shut the institution down, which obviously was a terrible thing for us and our family. But I would say things happened, but we were fortunate that St. Leo came calling here just outside of Tampa, as Ryan said. And, it's a great place in an unbelievable conference in the Sunshine State Conference. The facilities are top-notch. The campus itself looks like a resort. And we are around a lot of really, really good people that want to win. And obviously, for athletes. So we're really fortunate to be down here for sure.
Yeah, it's just kind of seeing pictures and seeing stuff online. It looks absolutely amazing. But I want to touch on St. Joe, how it was, a town of about 5,000 people. Rensselaer is about a town of 5,000 people. And I remember the first time that my wife Becca and I went up in the hard sell I had to put on her to let's go take this job for $3,000 a year. But it was by far the best 4 years of coaching that I'd had. It was awesome. It was a great place, and so many people sad to see it go. We always used to joke saying it was the biggest small school in the country. Someone always knew somebody that went there, and just it was was a really, really special place. So
It was. We loved it. Obviously, it was a, you know, as we talked, it's one of those places you're not picking it because of the big city or how beautiful the buildings were or anything like that. It was the people, without any question, from the community within Rensselaer to obviously how great the people were at the college and how tight knit a group that was. But you know, and I would encourage people when you're picking schools, find the right fit. Because if you were to walk on our campus and then see other campuses, you wouldn't say this is the most fancy campus you've seen. But there are very few guys, I think, that walked out of it that did not enjoy it and love it.
for sure, 100%. I think, and that's what we try to preach to these guys. I'm glad you said it, is fit is the biggest thing. And, you know, understanding that you're going to somebody that's going to have a huge impact on your life, one way or the other. Your college coach is going to have an enormous impact on your life, and you know, and your environment for that matter too. So, hey, I want to touch real quick on, you know, you had the unique opportunity of not being an assistant. So, and just kind of your first job was a head job, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, but you've done an absolutely amazing job of developing coaches over the years, and you know, just kind of give some insight on. You know, we'll have players look at this. We'll have our coaches look at this. So just kind of give me some insight on, hey, how'd you do it? How were you able to develop these guys?
Well, I mean, first thing is first is I was clueless when I started. Not that I have an idea now, but it was I had one way to doing it, and that was going to be the only and the right way. And I don't know. Looking back, there's a lot of things. There's a couple things that probably could get us fired, and there's a couple things that I definitely regret and should have handled some stuff differently. And I think the biggest part of that was getting to enjoy what you're doing. I think people get stuck into the now and the win-loss, and I'm not this, you know, everything feels good type guy, but you have to enjoy the experience. And I think, I hate to say it, but leaving St. Joe made me enjoy coaching even more because I did enjoy it, and I've enjoyed it tremendously here. But to be a head guy, when I came in, as I said, I knew everything. So I was running guys off. It didn't matter. You didn't look right, you know, that you wore your shirt the wrong way. I was in you know, and not to say that discipline, I think, is great. I think there's a fine line to it. I think that was part of it. I think one thing, you know, I've been fortunate to have great assistants. The first thing is I will say is they have to be great people. And that seems super cliche, and that seems so generic. And it does not make a difference if you're a big league coach or you're a guy, you know, coaching a T-ball team. If you have somebody that is not a good person or not loyal to you or your beliefs, then you probably have the wrong person, or they're going to make your life really difficult. So I would start there for sure. And that's one thing I always did is very, very few people, and still to this day, I've hired outside of guys that I knew. And meaning like, you know, you and I, we knew, you know, between us that knew your character, knew my character, knew how we do things, how we act, those type of things. Yeah, there are guys that hire people in you know, certain situations you get, you know, that you get resumes pumped in and all that type of stuff. But if I can ideally get somebody I'm comfortable with or know somebody that knows him, it's just like recruiting, trying to get those insides on people that you won't see until you're around them every day. From an assistant end of it, I had guys who want to be baseball coaches, that they want this to be their life. You know, like you're a lifetime baseball guy. A number of guys that I've had have all been lifetime, and including myself. A lot of things in this world I'm going to be able to do outside of baseball. So a lot of guys play baseball and say, man, I really like coaching. But sometimes it's because they can't find what job they're going to get into or what career path they want. You have to get somebody that understands it. And, you know, I think the biggest misinterpretation is, heck, I love throwing BP. I love hitting fungo. I love, you know, watching BP. That's about 20% of our job. Right. You know, you're dealing with personalities. You're dealing with, you know, keeping guys academically on track. You're dealing with families. You're dealing with, for us, obviously, our recruiting base. There's so many things outside of just the football field you better have somebody that loves it. And by the way, you have to have somebody that understands you're not going to be a millionaire doing this.
Right.
So there's the start. I think from a development of helping coaches, I let them coach. Once I trust them, I'm not going to let somebody show up and, let them run anything they want to run. Because I think I've got a feel. I do our pitching, I do our team defense. Obviously, there's different roles that you have as a head coach, but I try not to get involved into a swing mechanic. And when we do, I make sure I go to the assistant and say, hey, what do we got here? Because I don't want him thinking something different than what our hitting guy is. And I'm not in the middle of it every day with them.
Right.
There's times half the practice I'm sitting in a bullpen. And so I just show up and watch 15 swings and think I can fix them. Probably not going to do, too much. I'm not going to help them very much. And the other thing is, it also takes away from your credibility, I think. If the head coach is telling a guy something different than what you're doing, I think that's a bad way to run things.
Yeah. And, I was fortunate and got to witness it firsthand. So I thought you always did a really good job of balancing out, understand like, hey, this is what I see, this is my opinion, and you just opened it up with conversation, and that's how guys got better. So you were talking about basically recruiting assistant coaches. So if you could kind of go into some detail about the recruiting side for you, let us get inside your mind a little bit from what you look for from a tangible aspect for a potential prospect, and kind of some intangible things that you look at.
Well, I think the first thing, and I think a big part of this right now, is we get to dig in a little bit more deeper than we ever have in recruiting. Like, there's so many things happening right now, and I think there's some good and bad. Obviously we're in a really tough time with this quarantine and the issues that we have through the world. It's not just St. Leo or Florida or our country. It's everywhere. So we're getting more information. We have more availability to coaches right now. They answer your call in a minute because they want something to do. So that becomes different. But I think the biggest thing is with us, it starts with the academic piece. For us, anybody that's under a 3.0 unweighted GPA, we basically can't afford that student athlete. And because we want to make sure that financially that we can use the academic institutional aid and use our baseball aid. And the only way for us to do that is a 3.0 weighted GPA or unweighted GPA or higher, which basically allows us to extend our money more than it would if we were just getting a average student. We can get a good student, be able to make it more affordable for that student, and still leave us more money to keep adding pieces of the puzzle. So I think the academic piece becomes a huge conversation for any question. I think the next conversation when you're talking to that coach or you're listening is, what are we dealing with? What type of guy is he? Is he high maintenance? That's one thing I've tried to adjust in my career because usually the high maintenance guy, I used to be like, I'm not dealing with this guy. And it's an easy write-off. And not to say we'll never deal with a high maintenance guy, but it seems to be more and more guys are maintenance. I wouldn't say high, but hey, how about this? How about you just work and you go to school and you work your butt off, you be a good teammate, and we win games. Yeah. There's a lot more on guys' plates now than there ever has been. There's a lot more information in front of their fingertips. There's a lot of things that maybe the perception is not reality. And what level they might be at, or I'm going to be a pro guy, or I'm going to be this. Guys are getting opportunities without any question. But I think when we're talking about recruiting, the biggest thing we want is a guy that's going to care that his teammates have success, their team has success, and obviously the individual has success. So if we could get that guy that cares for all three of them, and you have to have some selfishness. There's no question, because you work your butt off for you to be good, which in turn makes our team better. But there are other things, when you hear guys stick around in the big leagues. I always throw this out there is you hear guys stick around in the because of how good of a clubhouse guy they were. Yeah. So they may extend a couple years. Well, guess what? A couple years in the big leagues is a couple $1 million. So you look at, prime example of that is probably David Ross, right? Everybody, sees that. They saw what a good teammate was, how good he was in base, on the field, in the dugout, off the field. and next thing you know, he's a manager at the big league. So, you know, I think that's a huge intangible that we need to look at. And during this time, we're going to even have more time to kind of, you know, really investigate that. But yeah, there's no question that we have to look at those intangibles. And then I guess the next thing is, and I assume this is where you're going with it, is what are we looking for as a player? I assume that's where we're going next.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You know, I think it's important for guys to A, be self-aware, and B, kind of know where they fit in from an athlete standpoint. And, you know, it's kind of one of those deals that, you know, you have to be strong and you have to be fast, and, you know, just to get someone else's kind of viewpoint, because, you know, I have a tendency to come off a little blunt sometimes. So.
Nah, not you. Not you. I think, you know, I think tools are great. There's a good start, right? So you see the guy that runs a 60, you see the guy's velocity, you see a guy that can hit the ball, you see a guy's physical size. Those are really good no-brainer tools, right? You can see that, you can evaluate that pretty easily. I think the biggest thing though is I've seen guys that are control really hard. Like down here, we have a lot of velocity. The pitchability is the conversation next. So if everybody to hit velocity, it's only velocity. So if you can't put it to where you want to put it, or have a second pitch or a third pitch, you're in trouble. You have to have some secondary stuff at the very least. That makes it so we're looking to see who can play, you know, and not just. I think the biggest compliment as a player is, man, he can really play, or as a pitcher, he can really pitch, because that gives us a better feel on if he's going to help us, because we can recruit him. Everyone can love it. We can, you know, we can see all these numbers and data. That's great. But the bottom line is, can he help our team win?
Right.
And if he can't, then guess what? We probably recruited the wrong guy. I've never heard anybody coach ever say, hey, that guy played his butt off. Man, he got big hits in big spots and threw big pitches in big spots. He was just an average player. Nobody says that.
Right. Yeah.
I've heard people say, man, he had tools coming from everywhere, and that kid can't play.
Can't play the game.
That happens a lot, you know. So trying to find those insides, I think, become a big deal. As you stated, you know, and I don't say this because I'm a Division II head coach. I say this because I look at the NCAA transfer portal every day, and I see all these, you know, these guys going on it. You have to find out what's the best fit for you, and that could be Division I, II, III, NAI, junior college, whatever that might be. It doesn't make a difference. If your experience is something that was worth it when you walk out and 40 years down the road, you're still proud to go to school, then you picked the right place. You know, that's a big piece. And, you know, it's tough to tell the player that. It's tough to tell mom and dad that. It's tough to tell mom and dad's friends that sometimes. Where they're going, I think the biggest thing is you need to brag about where you went. And I would encourage that. And, of course, nobody ever agrees with that conversation until they're in the middle of transfer.
Exactly.
And then they realize, you know, everybody always has an answer. We got a good friend that his son went through recruiting, another one's coming through now. And there were so many things that were told that I don't think he really believed until he couldn't find the right fit. And then all of a sudden, guess what? You know what? The ears open. So I would just encourage people to understand that. I wouldn't write anybody off. You know, you never know. Jim Brownlee told us one time that the same people you see on the way up are the same ones you see down. So you never know when you're going to run across that path again. So I would handle things the right way for sure, either way.
Yeah, for sure. You know, something that I got to witness firsthand, and it was pretty eye-opening to me, is working with you, just how much pitchers developed in a short amount of time. And I always tell people all the time that, you know, you were teaching intent before intent was cool, and before intent was, you know, a buzzword. And to see how guys, you know, are just kind of went through the program really in a short amount of time on the pitching side, and how much better they got. If you could dive into that a little bit, just kind of developing pitchers and you know, what you've done your whole career, basically.
Well, I appreciate that. I think it's one of those things that I guess if we were smarter, we probably have a lot more money in our pocket if we would have figured out some of these things that
You
they're
ain't
doing now.
joking.
Yeah, but I say this: if you want to be good at something, you have to practice it. And if you want to practice throwing hard, or you want to throw hard, you have to practice throwing hard. You want to throw your slider for a strike, you have to practice throwing your slider for a strike. And if the only time you're throwing with intent is game day, you're only practicing. You're pitching in a college setting. You're pitching one time in 7 days to work with the way that you're going to throw in a game. Which, by the way, if that's the only time you do it, it's your game day. And so for us, is we always talked about that mentality. If you want to throw hard, because that's what everybody rates. Everybody throws velocity. Want to worry about velocity. And I'll be honest with you, for us here, especially where velo is such a, I mean, in the Midwest it was a big deal, but it's a different level here. We put the gun away, and we have Rapsodo, we have those things, which is great. I think they're good developing tools. But the one tool I don't like is the velocity. The only thing I do like with the velo on Rapsodo, it can show a guy's mechanics haven't changed and he can still hold the same velocity. I do like that part of it. But that guy that gives up 5 runs and then runs behind the screen to see what he was throwing that night, he needs to worry about giving up 5 runs and not worry about how hard he was throwing. So I think as a pitching standpoint, our biggest thing is, and there's so many different ways to say it now, hinging your backside. We talk about backside pinch. We still to this day talk about it. I get made fun of and just about every time I talk about it. But one thing for me is, if you cannot control your lower half, it doesn't make a difference where direction the baseball is coming out or how hard it is. Because for one, you'll never be repeatable. And for another, your body, especially what we call your backside pinch, which now the big key here, or the big word now, is hinging. You hear that often as these smarter people start to dive in and really, people are doing. But it's crazy. I was on a pitching call, podcast the other night, and I was listening to these guys talk, and it's the same thing. It doesn't make a difference who's saying it. They may say it different, but it's the same thing. If you don't allow your arm to catch up, guess what? It's probably not going to come out. For one, is hard, and for the second one is probably not going to be where you want it to be. So then your fastball is going to be affected by, your breaking ball is going to be affected, and your changeup is. So we try to do a mechanical breakdown, minimal time. It takes us about 3 minutes a day to get guys, and every guy will be different, but we get them to understand what that means, allowing their arm to catch up. So if they repeat it over and over and over again, when they say play ball, you don't panic and go back to what you used to do. It's what we do now. So when you're talking about intent, we want them to understand who they are, what their arm does, what their body does, which is most important, and really it works in your core starts to allow your arm to catch up. Because every pitcher out there, I am sure multiple times, have heard stay back from their, and very few people, when I ask them that question when it comes in recruiting, very few people will ever tell me what that means. It usually means sit on my backside. It usually means, get back over the rubber, on the other side, which makes sense. But how do you do it? For us, we want to make sure, quote unquote, hinging / backside, that to be in the same spot. So you basically have to generate back before you go forward. You can't gain power before you go forward. So when they say stay back, our guys hopefully know what that means. And once you see that happen, you start to worry, see development. You see velocity go up. Their breaking ball gets better. Their changeup gets better. Most importantly, their fastball command gets better. Which then, in the grand scheme of things, so we got a Friday night guy. If he can't throw enough strikes, and I got to take him out in the 5th to 6th inning, now I got 2 more 9-inning games after this one to figure out what I'm doing with pitching, because his pitch count, he can't keep it down because he doesn't throw enough strikes. So if I can get a guy to understand it, have some feel to both sides of the plate, can throw a breaking ball and a changeup when he wants it, if we can do that, we're generally going to be in pretty good shape in a game, especially if you throw it to where you're supposed to throw it. We usually have a chance to win.
Yeah. And I think that was always the cool thing. There's two things I always thought you did a really good job of. Number one was those guys, just some of the guys that I was there, or when I was there in that 4-year span of, guys that were 83, 84 at our camp, leaving or coming, after they came on campus, they were 93, 94. Some guys even firmer when they got drafted out of there, whatever the case may be. But it was taking a guy, and I don't necessarily want to use names here, but taking a guy that maybe didn't have elite stuff, but was able to pitch in big spots. He kind of found a role for him, number one, and then they were able to kind of own that role. And they may come in, and if they throw 15 pitches, 11 of them were breaking balls. Or, and the other fact was they all pitched with tempo. I don't know if you're still teaching that or not, but, right now it's kind of hard to watch a summer league game for me, especially after coaching with you, and seeing how just slow it is, and then it's ball, grooved pitch, first strike, ball, another grooved pitch, and it's like, man, if you just got on the mound and just got to work, I think it would be a much more productive outing.
I think it starts with knowing who they are, right? So some guys that think that, we ask a guy, we do a questionnaire, an up and down questionnaire, and it starts from who they are, what type of pitcher they are. Are they a contact guy? Are they a strikeout guy? And there's a number of questions I ask them, and a lot of times you'll be amazed to see the guys that, if a guy doesn't throw 88 miles an hour, he thinks he's not a strikeout guy. And I've seen lefties get to the inner half on a right-handed hitter, especially with 2 strikes, get the inner half and strike out 9 to 11 guys a game. Well, guess what? He's a strikeout pitcher. Your velocity has nothing to do with who you are. But again, I have other guys that throw hard and need to pitch in early contact, need to be those. So I think getting them to understand who they are, and you talk roles. Once you get guys to understand who they are, then their roles kind of fall into place. And now your job as a coach is to get them to buy into their role. So it doesn't make a difference. I think a great example, and I think this is going to help coaches really in the long run, is you see the Rays now, right? And all these guys, you've got all these guys of different slots and where their starters are going back, and, everybody's flipped around their rotation. They don't have the standard, here's my 5 to 7 inning starter and go. Guys are taking roles and using them in different parts of the game, which I think for me and for most coaches out there now, hey, if he can do it, you can do it.
Right.
So
yeah.
If you can know who they are and what their role is, then they own the role. Then guess what? They want to be the best guy of what they think they are. So if we can get them to believe in who they should be, we're in good shape. I think but that's communication. That's getting them to understand. Sometimes it's hard communication, right? Is that guy that thinks he's got all the answers. He might just need to get beat up a little bit. He might need to get started and set an example. And you don't wish him bad, but
right.
Sometimes, if you can get that guy, I always think about it, and this as a hitting guy, that guy doesn't want to make a change until he's in a slump.
Yeah, humility, man, it's what it is.
Right. Humility is a big thing in this game. So until we can get them to understand them, who they are and what we're trying to do, and we're actually trying to help them, not demote them.
Right.
If we can get them to understand, we're in good shape. I think from a tempo standpoint, you talk about, baseball is a boring sport, and I love baseball more than anybody, as much as anybody. It's a boring sport. The last thing we need to do is take our time, not throw enough strikes, allow our defense to get bored and tired, and legs are heavy, game slow. That's tough. And down here, that's even harder. We're working on that every day. I think you probably hear me yell tempo 50 times a practice, I feel like, or an inter squad or during a game, is to get back on the mound. I think what tempo allows guys to do, as long as the pitcher can be, understand the fine line of being out of control and having good tempo.
Right.
Being out of control, it just means he's out of control. If he can control the tempo of the game and he's in control of where he throws the baseball, the last thing you want to do is allow a hitter to slow down. You always hear a guy when, hey, what happened right there? Man, I got sped up.
Yeah.
Well, our job as a pitcher is to try to speed him up. So I don't think people take we need to be on the offensive side of it. All right. Rather than I'm the pitcher, I'm going to just wait for the ball to be flipped back at me. I'm going to look at my middle guys. I'm going to look at everybody else in the crowd. I'm going to get my sign. And then, 19 to 22 seconds later, I'm going to throw the pitch. we want to be within 13 seconds of once it hits the catcher's glove. If
Yeah.
we can be within inside 13 seconds, we're in good shape. Realistically, it's probably 15, 16. But if you paid attention to what 15, 16 compared to 19 to 21 seconds is, it seems like a lifetime.
Oh my gosh, man. It's crazy. It's crazy.
It will wear you out. And as a coach, you're like, especially if the guy's struggling on the mound, you're like, oh, speed up. At least I can go to the bullpen faster.
You know, I think another part with tempo is the strike portion of it. It's, you know, as a hitting coach, I hate to see that guy that's going to pound the zone where you're going to have to get 15 hits a game to win. You know, like it's and I think it's something that is, don't get me wrong, stuff plays, right?
Yeah.
Stuff is, you know, probably the king in all this. But when you talk about stuff, you talk about stuff in the zone or at least starts in the zone or ends up in the zone or something, not just going through and, you know, being able to have a lot of spin on a breaking ball that's, you know, thrown 58 feet. So that's cool, man. I really appreciate it. You got any advice for high school guys right now or anything like that?
Well, I think right now is do the best job you can to market yourself to places that are realistic. You know, I think that's the biggest thing is understand that and, you know, evaluate yourself and not others. I think, you know, somebody might see a guy, you might, you know, obviously your team's been very good and obviously the guys you guys have, you know, around the Louisville area are good and they're going to some places and all of a sudden so-and-so goes 0 for 3 with 2 strikeouts and a bad ground ball, but then, you know, Mikey so-and-so went 3 for 3 off of that guy, so he should be in the Power 5. Like, that's not how it works. So
Right.
I would just encourage guys to understand that find the best spot for you and not anybody else. This is a really weird time we're going through in recruiting. There's a lot of bouncing around. There's a lot of unknowns, a lot of things that we have going that have never happened before. So, you know, they'll be in contact with you sooner for sure, if it's legal, obviously. But the other thing is it's really hard for somebody not knowing what they look like on the mound or in the field or at bat. So, you know, I don't know. Hopefully this summer we can get out and see people. But, you know, I would encourage you to start doing some stuff electronically if you have some video. And I think for me, I don't need to see the guy that, you know, has 3 career homers and they're all the first 3 swings. I try to find something in a cage or give us an idea on bat speed. And of course, game footage is good, but it doesn't need to be excessive.
Right. Awesome, man. As always, pal. Great seeing you. Hope to see you on the road this summer at some point. And take it easy.
You too. Thanks, guys.
Yep. See you, man.
See you, bud.